Well, last week might have been one of the more painful weeks ever to be a Penguins fan, at least in this century. But maybe tonight can leaven that emotion a little bit. I'm Matt Gajtka along with Dan Kingerski. Dan's back in Pittsburgh after his all too brief sojourn to Toronto. The quarantine was longer than the stay, as it turned out, as the Penguins were eliminated. As you know, two or probably 3-1 in the best of five series to qualify for the Stanley Cup playoffs proper. So now here we are on Draft Lottery night. It's our Pittsburgh postgame / Pittsburgh Hockey Now Draft Lottery Phase 2 watch party. And Dan, I did not think we were going to be here on a night like this, but I suppose it's nice to have something after what we saw last week to spark some interest and spark some enthusiasm among the Penguins fans.
Yeah, this might be a hell of a consolation prize, huh? I mean,
yeah.
I don't think the Penguins were Stanley Cup contenders this year, but they always have that puncher's chance. So you're curious how far they can go. If you don't win the Stanley Cup, if you get this kid, I don't know how much video you watched on Lafreniere, but
enough to know that, yeah, he's eye popping.
Yeah, he looks like a man among boys. The way he moves the puck, the way he's just controlling the ice surface. Even against a very good Team USA in the World Juniors, he was backing them in. He did more in this World Junior Championships than Jack Hughes did in the previous couple. He's just head and shoulders above Jack Hughes, who was fairly highly sought last year. Whoever gets him is going to get a really good player.
And it's so interesting with how this has been developed here by the NHL, Dan. It's that it's not all or nothing, but it's not like the second place team out of the teams that lost in the qualifying round gets number 2 or number 3. You drop all the way down to the middle of the first round. So it's a 12.5% chance for each of those teams that lost in the first round. The Penguins are among them, of course, the New York Rangers, the Edmonton Oilers, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Those are the 4 highest profile teams, the 4 teams that you would wonder, well, maybe this isn't exactly how the draft was intended to be, but that's the way it is this year. And I find it interesting, too, because the last time the Penguins won the lottery, it wasn't your typical end-of-season draft lottery either. It was after the full season lockout, and there were several ping pong balls allotted to different teams depending on how bad they'd been in the previous 2 and 3 years. The Penguins had the maximum amount, but that was still under 10%. I believe it was about 6 or 7% when they won the Crosby lottery in 2005. So a better chance this time, which is really interesting considering they had the 7th best points percentage in the NHL this past season.
Yeah, I don't think the NHL or the NHLPA really envisioned this kind of scenario where 4, maybe 5 playoff teams, Nashville, Winnipeg, and Calgary were all kind of 3 of those teams were battling for 2 spots. Only Calgary won their qualifying round. In fact, Calgary knocked out Winnipeg. But, so you really have 5 teams who could have been or should have been in the playoffs who are now going to win a player like Lafreniere. So what's that? 62.5% chance that Lafreniere won't. And I'm pronouncing his name incorrectly, aren't I, Matt?
You're close enough. You're close enough.
Yeah,
Lafreniere, yeah.
Lafreniere. But he's not going to have to start at the bottom like Jack Hughes or even Sidney Crosby, who joined what became the worst team in the NHL, or Alex Ovechkin, who joined a terrible team. He's going to start with a team that has some chops and has some veteran leadership and has some talent, which is just going to make him even better to start.
Let's look at some of our folks in the chat room already. We have some folks talking about the draft lottery as we get closer to it. The screen's off to my right on NBCSN, by the way, if you're looking for the lottery coverage. Once again, Walt Flanagan's with us. I want the Pens to get the pick, not only because it's good for them, because it will give everyone else a big sad. I enjoy that. Some schadenfreude for sure.
Even better.
Logan O'Neill asks, are you guys streaming the lottery? No, you're going to have to watch that on your own second screen. So we'll provide the commentary. Just turn down the sound, and we'll have it for you here. We'll have what you need to know.
You know Dan, what? I actually don't. I'm here at little Leo's place. I got roped into babysitting.
Okay.
Which explains the hat and the different background. They don't have cable.
Well, that's a shame. You'll have to.
So I will be relying on you to tell me what happened.
To figure it out somewhere else. Well, I'll have it for you As I thought I had the right channel on here. NBCSN. There we go. Sorry, NHL Network. My fault. So I'm getting it wrong already. But
Okay.
that's where you'll find it. You'll see it online too. If you're on Twitter, if you're on Facebook, you'll figure it out as well. Dan, I think the Penguins might be the team that would tick off the most people in hockey if they won this thing. But I could be wrong. Maybe it's the Oilers because of just first overall pick fatigue. Could be the Rangers because of the big market thing, and people tend to not root for the big market teams if you're not right there and you didn't grow up rooting for the blue shirts. Or the Maple Leafs certainly aren't popular across Canada. So I'm curious on your take as to who might be the least popular choice if the ping pong ball comes out in their favor.
That's a really that's like a three-way tie running to the line there between Edmonton, Toronto, and Pittsburgh. I don't think people would scream too much because Nashville built their franchise without ever getting a franchise player, right? They languished for 15 years or so. Patrick Stephon was Atlanta.
Yep.
So I can't even tell you who Nashville's big lottery winner was. And probably the same with Winnipeg. People just like Winnipeg, so no one's going to be mad about that either. But everybody hates the Penguins. Everybody hates Toronto. And Edmonton has made such a mess of lottery picks from Yakupov to Taylor Hall, and they've just had so many that didn't pan out that should have. They've had enough.
Yakupov was the big miss. The other players that they've picked have turned out to be productive players. Nugent Hopkins, Hall, of course, McDavid is the player of his generation. What about the team that needs it the most, though? You have some teams in there like a Winnipeg who was looking like they were making the move to serious cup contender a couple of years ago, made the West final, and now they've fallen off for various reasons. So Winnipeg is up there. Florida could always use a jolt, right? And I don't know if that would be popular in the league office or popular among Canadian fans. Certainly not. They would just add that to their list of resentments against the Miami-based franchise. So there's that too. You spoke about Nashville, though, and that's a team that maybe has stagnated as well. They were, speaking of a couple of years ago, they were right there knocking on the door against the Penguins and couldn't get over the hump. So it's an interesting mix here. Then you have the Minnesota Wild, who are just almost chronically bland when you look at their talent base. Yeah, they have some guys, some names like Suter and Parise, but at the same time, they've really never stood out in any way. They had one or two decent runs in the playoffs, one really early on in maybe 2002 or 03, but not a lot since. So it's a team that gets a lot of support. And of course, in the state of hockey, they're always going to be popular up there. But they could use a transcendent talent like this too. And I'm not sure this is of the level. I know it's not the level of McDavid or Crosby. I'll put it that way. But I think Lafreniere is maybe that level right below. What's your feeling on that?
That's really difficult. I do put him. I guess I would put him as an elite first overall pick, but not a generational. And maybe splitting hairs or being a little too semantic, but he's going to be. I think he's an all-star, or he's probably a 30-goal scorer at least. In the right situation, providing he has a center to dish to him. I'd certainly take a 30 or maybe even a 40-goal scorer on my team, even if he's not a transcendent Sidney Crosby or McDavid.
Well, right, and he's a winger. So as we know, that seems to be the least valuable of the four general positions when it comes down to this stuff. If there's a tiebreaker, people tend to put the center at number one. They put the D-man at number two. And then I guess goalie and winger are split down the middle in terms of draft because teams don't draft goalies that high. They feel like they can find talent and they can develop talent. It's always a maxim, or it has been most of the time, outside of Rick DiPietro, Marc-Andre Fleury, that you don't take a goalie that high just because of the huge risk factor there and the unpredictability of their development. I'm not sure if that's as true these days as it used to be when you had less video on guys, but that does seem to be the way that it looks here. So the fact that Lafreniere is a winger, by the way, played for Rimouski, Sidney Crosby's junior team in the Quebec League. If you're into symmetry, maybe that makes you feel a little bit better here today. But the fact that Lafreniere was a winger probably downgrades him, even if the talent, even if the skill set and the athleticism and everything is right up there with anybody that's ever gone first overall. Okay, they rolled out the bingo hopper, Dan, but they're not quite ready to put the bingo balls in there. I do like this aspect because typically all we see is Bill Daly unveiling cards out of envelopes. So this time we'll actually see him plucking the ball out of the hopper. So we'll have a church hall feel to phase 2 of the draft lottery.
Oh, this is quite interesting, isn't it? I mean, look, I you know why they're doing the actual live ping pong balls, because there still exists across Canada the conspiracy theory that the Penguins needed a new arena, and the balls might have been a little tainted when the Penguins won Sidney Crosby, and maybe the Washington Capitals were given a gift the year before. Those conspiracy theories exist. Just imagine if Lafreniere were in Toronto or wound up with Pittsburgh. Everyone would just howl and say the league engineered it. So they're gonna pick the balls right in front of you.
I never quite understood the conspiracy theory that it was weighted toward the Penguins, because much like 15 years ago, the Rangers were right in it. I think Sidney Crosby on Broadway would have been exactly what the NHL wanted. If they were going to fix it, they would have tilted it toward New York. That's my feeling. And I know that the Penguins have that reputation of having the big stars. But again, it's Pittsburgh. We're the 22nd market in the nation, maybe a little bit higher because the NHL includes some smaller Canadian markets. But Pittsburgh is not some premier location. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, don't forget, at the time, the Penguins were fighting for a new arena. They were actually behind in that fight. They were losing that fight. And you had, remember Jim Balsillie trying to buy them and move them to Hamilton? So the Penguins were a giant headache for the NHL. I'm not saying I believe the conspiracy theory, but maybe the basis for it was a little sound.
I do believe that the NHL did not want to lose Pittsburgh as a market. That was certainly the case. You saw how Gary Bettman put his thumb on the scale during the Jim Balsillie situation. During the whole thing, it just felt like the Penguins were going to get the arena. The NHL may have given them some more time and some more leeway than they would some other markets, like, say, Atlanta. In that case, there has been a relocation this century, of course, and we touched upon that a little bit earlier. So they've just started the coverage on NHL Network and NBC-SN. If you're in Canada, I'm sure you can watch it on Sportsnet too. They've gone to commercial, so we still have a couple of minutes left here to discuss what could happen. Lafreniere to the Penguins would be, like I said, a very unpopular development around the NHL. But in Pittsburgh, Dan, that could be just the jolt. It would be just the jolt, I think, that this franchise appears to need now. I wouldn't have said that a week ago. I felt like they were on pretty solid footing, but maybe I'm being a little short-sighted here. That 5-game series against Montreal, well, 4 games as it turned out, that discouraged me on a lot of aspects of the Penguins and their near and distant futures. So this feels like this could be the one last best chance to get another cup out of the Crosby, Malkin, Letang era, assuming that trio is kept together.
Well, I think you just said a mouthful there. If you get a kid like Lafreniere, you definitely keep that core together, and there's no question you're now cup hunting again for the next couple or 3 years. Mm-hmm. If you don't get him, it rips that can of worms wide open then. Like, what do you do? Do you rebuild? Do you try to retool? Or do you kind of let the guys ride off into the sunset? You just kind of keep tinkering around the edges. You trade a Matt Murray. You replace Justin Schultz, and you kind of just you let the guys have their final chapter. Those are the Penguins' 3 options. If you win tonight, it just adds this entire new dimension and jolt where you can kind of stand pat. You can make the moves you have to, like replacing Schultz and picking a goaltender, but all of a sudden you're a lot better team than you were a couple days ago.
I think if Lafreniere doesn't go to the Penguins, the team I'd like to see him go to, this may not make me popular, but I think seeing him in Toronto, adding to that embarrassment of forward talent, would be really interesting. And having him in a major media market, Canadian or otherwise. Toronto is still one of the largest cities in the world, definitely one of the largest in North America. And they get plenty of pub. And I've enjoyed the re-rise of the Leafs, if you will, even though it's been now stagnated by the fact that they can't get past the first round of the playoffs, regardless of which format the playoffs are under. Dan, I don't know about you, but I thought they were going to win Game 5 after that comeback in Game 4. It just goes to show you that momentum doesn't really exist that much, I suppose, in professional sports, and especially hockey, a game that can turn on a bounce or just one flick of the wrist.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and I thought Columbus showed just tremendous mental strength. They could have worried, they could have imploded a little bit after a comeback like that from Toronto, but instead they used it as fuel, and I think that's a mark of a team with hunger, with leadership, with a good coach, and it just kind of fit the Columbus mold that we know. I'll tell you the team I want to see win. I'd like to see Billy Garrett in Minnesota get this pick. They have been terminally bland. You know, when they got Eric Stahl, they kind of got him third hand, you know, from Carolina by way of New York. They've never had a real star up there. How was it 10 years ago now that the Wild owner dished those ridiculous contracts to Parise and Suter, and he has 5 more years left on them.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
Yes, 2012. So almost. Yeah, it's been
8 years ago. Yeah, they were 15-year contracts. Sorry, yeah, or 13-year. That's right. You know, I'd like to see Minnesota, because you know they're hockey fans up there. You know Minnesota digs its hockey and knows its stuff. Maybe unlike some other fair weather or Sun Belt type cities that show up in March or April and don't realize the season starts at the same time as football.
What are you talking about, Dan?
You know, so I would like to see Minnesota have somebody to really kind of call their own, their franchise centerpiece.
Let's go to some comments here. NES Addict says, sounds crazy, but I'd rather lose with Malkin and Sid than trade them to win. I just always hated Yager not being a lifelong Penguin. Yeah, the scar tissue, I suppose, goes pretty deep when it comes to that. I'm not sure I'd necessarily agree with that, because they've already won with Crosby and Malkin. They've already won 3 cups. So it's not like you just be scrapping these guys and not giving them their full run. Well, you're not going to have to worry about Crosby. He's a Penguin for life. And probably Malkin too, considering the restrictiveness of that no trade clause. What else out here? Let's see. Rob Augenstein says Steve Dangle would be super mad if the Pens got him. Well, that might be reason enough to see his Leaf fan reaction video if that pans out. I really enjoy, you're up there, Dan. I really enjoy how tuned in and how hyper sensitive any Leafs news is in Toronto. I just wish I wish I could have grown up in a city like that, I suppose. And Pittsburgh can get pretty amped up about the Penguins, but there's still that extra level that occurs in Toronto around any kind of Leafs triumph or disaster, and they've had a lot more of the latter than the former. So that's why I say the Maple Leafs there, because I think that would put that hype meter way, way up, and once again just turn the intensity way up on another Maple Leaf season whenever they play it. You know,
somebody explained it to me. Actually, Rob Simpson. We were having a few post-series beverages, and we were at the place called The Bottom Line, right beside the Hockey Hall of Fame on Friday night. You know, a couple of former hockey players were hanging with us, and it was explained to me this way. In Toronto, all of those giant media companies, Sportsnet and TSN, their yearly budget is almost built on what they expect of the Maple Leafs. So if you see a bit of hyper focus or hyper coverage of them, it's because there's 10 million people in the GTA. There's like 20 or 25 million people in the rest of the country. So, you know, there's also not really a competing sport in Canada. So the Maple Leafs drive a part of the whole media economy up there. And so you've got this perfect storm of A, hockey mad country, B, a media system that's kind of dependent upon them and dependent upon Maple Leafs news. So that's why you have like that intensity. I don't know. I would hate to see Lafreniere get dumped into that, because I don't think Kyle Dubas is long for the job, and I think they're not built for the playoffs, and I think they're going to be blown up before they ever win, because I don't think they can win with the way they're currently constructed, which is kind of and forgive me, Matt, stats, but I think Toronto's constructed on paper, not on ice, and that's going to be their downfall forever.
Well, you look at some of the stats from that series against Columbus. They couldn't get any shots in the scoring areas, so the stats did tell a tale there, and they can certainly be more than just goals and assists. It's how are you playing, and how is your team doing the things you need to do to win? And against Columbus, the Blue Jackets had their way defensively. That's got to be very concerning for a Maple Leafs team built around speed and skill, at least supposedly. So the ping pong balls are being loaded in. If you're watching on NHL Network or NBCSN, you don't need me to tell you, but if you're not, then I will give you some of the play-by-play. They're dropping the Oilers in. They're dropping the Wild in. This is going one by one, extremely dramatic. And sometimes the NHL can, I think, whiff on these situations and not realize that they can milk this for all it's worth. And they're definitely doing it now. So I give them that much credit. Nashville going into the bingo hopper. I wonder if it's going to be Bettman himself, because usually it's down to Bill Daly for this sort of thing. I think it's going to be Gary this time. This is pretty rare, actually. We only see him for the presentation of the Cup and the Stanley Cup final press conference.
Okay, so who are the first balls out?
They're just putting them in right now. They still haven't even. They're just going to pick one. So it's very simple. It's not like the regular lottery, quote unquote, in which you have all these permutations. As it goes now, the first ball out of the hopper wins, number one pick, and then the rest of them fall in line according to reverse standings order beyond the teams that actually missed the playoffs. So from 9 down to whatever it would be, 16 or 17, 9 down to 16, they'll just go in line. And the Penguins are being dropped in now, so we're almost full. There's a very serious-looking man in a black suit with, of course, the signature COVID mask. And then also, I like this, on a Hollywood Squares looking type of a Zoom call, they have all the general managers ready to react to what's about to happen here.
Who's got the center square?
They have an NHL logo at the center square, it looks like. Jim Rutherford is left center, if you're curious.
Okay, so no Jim J. Bullock or Joan Rivers in the center.
No.
Well, there's
Rutherford for the block.
Reference, huh?
Yeah, I used to watch Hollywood Squares. I watched the reboot in the 2000s. I remember that with Tom Bergeron.
I never did. I watched the original. Was it John Davidson was the host?
Yeah, you're predating me now. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure John Davidson was the host, and Jim J. Bullock was always there. And who else?
All right, the balls have been loaded, and the air is moving them around. This is fantastic. And they're waiting. Pregnant pause. Is Gary going to come over? I'm not sure. It's just the bingo hopper in the middle of this soundstage, essentially. One's got to hop up at some point. No Craig Patrick with his 4-leaf clover this time to help the Penguins out, unfortunately. Legend has it that's what delivered them the Sidney Crosby pick. Shane Glass says it's Whoopi Goldberg that goes in the center square, by the way. That was the new edition of Hollywood Squares.
That was the new one, yeah.
We have the ball, Dan, and it is the New York Rangers who have won Alexis Lafreniere. The Rangers, Panarin last summer, Lafreniere this summer, and that rebuild has certainly shifted into a higher gear now, hasn't it?
Well, yeah, you add Capo Caco to the mix, who I think might be a better player or is a better player than Jack Hughes. So, yeah, Matt, I'll tell you what, New York was good after the trade deadline. Took the pressure off of them. And, Chris Kreider got hurt. We all wrote them off. And they galloped. They were within a couple or maybe 4 points, I think, of a wild card spot when the pandemic hit. If they had continued upon that pace, there was a real chance New York actually made the playoffs.
So here they are after Kakko, after the big signing of Panarin, and it does seem like they may have some clarity now on the goaltending situation, just with had the feel of maybe the last ride for Henrik Lundqvist in the playoffs with Shesterkin playing Game 3 against the Hurricanes when they were swept out of the qualification round. So Well, the division didn't get any easier, and I'll put it that way for the
Yeah.
Penguins, as the Rangers will get Lafreniere. The Penguins will now pick, by the way, in case you're wondering, they'll now pick 15th because, as I said, the teams will line up according to reverse standings order after that. So 15th instead of first for the Pens. I suppose that's better than what we thought they would pick coming into this, but nowhere near number one. If you follow the NHL draft, you know that obviously one's huge, but once you get beyond like 5 or 10, you'd be surprised how quickly that uncertainty kicks up, and it becomes more and more of a crapshoot as you go further and further down, even in the bottom half of round one. So now it's on the scouts to figure some things out. And Dan, I know you'll have some coverage on Pittsburgh Hockey Now regarding where they might look when it comes to middle of the round talents.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll dive into that. And I've got a couple scouts who like to be on the payroll this time of year, a couple former coaches in the junior ranks, and now they do some scouting in the Q and in the OHL. So we'll be picking their brains. Here's an interesting question for you, Matt. We can keep this conversation going.
Sure.
If you're the Penguins, you now pick 15th overall. You can keep that pick, knowing you're going to get a pretty good shot at an NHL player with 15th overall. Or you give this pick to Minnesota to protect against what might happen next year.
Yeah, that's intriguing. I saw some people speculating. I saw you speculating on, in fact, what you do with the draft pick.
Walt Flanagan's on it now too.
Yeah, because now that looks like more of a piece than a player at this point. And the Penguins have some. Well, they've had some recent history of giving some picks up. So I don't know if I feel great about coughing up a first rounder. This is what the highest they've picked at least a couple years. So I know they've moved up a couple of times, but 15th is pretty good in terms of recent years for the Penguins, going back to the last full season lockout. So I don't know if I feel good about getting rid of it at the moment. I first blush, I would not, because I feel like it's time to start holding on to these picks. But if you're of the mind that it's more of a quick rebuild and try to get one last squeeze out of the orange here with Crosby and Malkin, then it'd be hard for me to argue against you, because 15 is still pretty valuable.
Well, I don't mean to trade it away, but the Penguins do owe Minnesota that first round pick, be it this year.
Oh, sorry. I forgot about that. Yep,
yeah. So do you give Minnesota the 15th overall pick as kind of insurance that if the Penguins just kind of fall apart with injuries and whatever else might happen next year, they're in the lottery again. Do you protect yourself against that terrible possibility and just kind of pass it up this year? Or do you just assume you're going to make the playoffs next year, not be in the lottery, and give it up this year?
I think it's a pretty safe assumption they'll make the playoffs next year. So if I just had to play it by the numbers strictly, I would not give up this one. To be a betting man, I would say 15 would be the highest of the two in the next two. Now, if you're talking next 3 or 4 or 5 years, then you have a real discussion, but we're not in this case. So that's where I would stand on that. Yeah,
I guess maybe I'm a bit of a horse trader. I might call Bill Guerin back and say, we'll give you the 15th pick. We need a little more something from you just to complete this little transaction, and see what they can squeeze out of Minnesota to get Minnesota's going to have the 9th pick. And if the Penguins gave it up, they'd have the 15th pick too. That's pretty good. And that gives you some real leverage to move up into the top 10, which from what I'm reading, a lot of the scouts are really high in the top 10 this year. They say that's where the cliff happens, somewhere around 10 or 11 before you get to that third tier.
So there's a possibility, and we know that, Jim Rutherford and Bill Guerin have a nice relationship. So if there was a GM that you try to work something like that out with, it would be Bill, I would imagine, or maybe a couple of the guys that have been around for a while. Well, we've reached the half-hour mark here. I wanted to make sure I got any other comments, because there were some funny reactions to the Rangers getting the first overall pick here. And by the way, New York, when's the last time they had number one? Have they ever drafted number one? I'm not sure. That's a good question. But
Kakko was 2.
Yeah. I don't know if the Rangers have had it in the modern NHL. Maybe if you go way back. Stephanie has a conspiracy theory. She says, I knew New York would get it because the man dropped their ball when he put it in the tube. I didn't really notice that, but I wasn't eagle-eyeing him. of course, there's that conspiracy theory that back in 83, 84, something like that, David Stern bent an envelope in the NBA draft and ensured that the Knicks got Patrick Ewing. So I suppose we might have a little bit of a parallel here with that one. Walt Flanagan asks, if you think you can swing a big trade, Letang, Murray, Malkin, etc., absolutely send the 15th pick to Minnesota. So, yeah, that also factors in to the offseason intrigue. Is there something else on the back burner or the front burner for Jim Rutherford? And JV says, keep the pick so JR can't trade the next first pick for another undersized forward. Okay, taking some shots here.
Well, that's the thing that's going to happen, Matt. I think, the Penguins have certainly, they're not even in the same universe as the Pirates right now. But that loss was a little bit of an ego deflator, and I think even a bit of an interest deflator from fans who might not be willing to believe as easily next season. And when you don't believe so readily, maybe you don't buy that Tuesday night ticket because you're not as excited, or maybe you don't buy the extra jersey for Christmas next year because you're just a level below where you were. I think the Penguins are going to have to, big picture now, the Penguins are going to have to kind of weather the storm a little bit and get to wherever they're going. I don't think they can stand pat and say it'll be okay, because I think people know it's not going to be okay unless you're okay with, kind of Butch and Sundance charging into the Argentinian police force at the end of the movie.
Thanks to Shane Glass, by the way, for filling us in. The last time the Rangers picked first overall was 1965, so we're talking original 6. That was when the amateur draft was under a completely different format. Andre Veilleux from Montreal Junior B, that was their pick. So they're hoping this one, Alexis Lafreniere from Rimouski of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, works out a little bit better. And, in terms of what you just said there, Dan, speaking of saying a mouthful, I think you did too, because I'm with you on that. I just feel like a general deflation from the fan base with how this one ended. It was pretty easy or easier to write off last year's playoff exit to the Islanders, just because they'd come off of, back-to-back cups, then a run to the second round and a really hard-fought series against Washington in 2018. Last year, you say, okay, off year, you lose in the first round. That's allowed once in a while. But this year you lose to the 24th overall seed in the NHL, even if it is a 5-game series coming off a 4-month break for COVID-19, all unforeseen scenarios. But the results are the results, and I guarantee the Maple Leafs are just as down or close to it. I guarantee teams like the Edmonton Oilers, they felt like they had a great shot, but they should feel down about it. They should feel distraught because everyone was operating under the same circumstances. It's not like the Penguins had 4 months off and the Canadians were practicing for 4 months. So it was a level playing field, even if it's a different kind of a playing field this year.
Well, I'll go one further with you as well. The Penguins we watched against Montreal looked almost identical to the Penguins we saw in February, when they couldn't hold their structure together and they were making bad mistakes and they weren't taking that extra step to get into the slot and doing all of those little things that separate a good effort from a successful effort. Here, come here, bud. No, Leo wants to join me.
Nice.
Here, come here, Leo. No, okay, there, you can have that back.
My son Lucas almost walked in on us about 10 minutes ago. He was eager to see the lottery balls.
He would have probably been an upgrade over you and I.
Hey, he's no stranger to the microphone. There's Leo. All right. I like the cut.
There you are. Hey, bud.
The kid's got some hair on him.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I wonder if it's my family tree, huh?
Maybe so. Maybe so. Well, thank you so much for everyone out there listening. This has been fun. We didn't think we'd be here, but an enjoyable Monday evening, at least the start of it. So the result didn't go the way that Penguins fans wanted, but at least we had some suspense, something to think about. I wonder what Leo thinks about all this. He's going to become a Rangers fan suddenly with them loading up with some young talent. I know he moved to Pittsburgh, so that wouldn't go over too well.
If I make him any fan, and I hate to say this, I have a soft spot for Montreal just because of the history and the chants and how crazy their fans are. So I have a little soft spot. He may have a jersey waiting for him.
Well, lovely. For Dan Kingerski, for Leo, for Charles Nelson Riley and Whoopi Goldberg and Tom Bergeron, I'm Matt Gajtka saying goodnight on Pittsburgh. Post-game, during game, I don't know what you want to call this one. It's a Pittsburgh Hockey Now video presentation, though. Click subscribe to get all of our content, get alerts to your phone or your laptop wherever you access our videos. Pittsburgh Sports Live rolling on throughout the summer into the fall, regardless of who's playing or when they're playing. We'll have more post-game shows. And on Pittsburgh Hockey Now, plenty of Penguins content. Now we know a lot more about where they stand going into the draft, at least, and what should be another very interesting offseason. Good night.